What's the verdict on cigarettes? Are they bad for real?
Okay. Nicotine, but here's what's crazy. Nicotine is neuroprotective. Nicotine is great for us. Not that everyone should take it, but it increases acetylcholine and dopamine and epinephrine, leads to heightened focus, improved memory, and can offset neurodegeneration and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Yes.
Okay. Can we basically have this blurb that says Professor Huberman says smoking cigarettes is good for you?
No, because smoking cigarettes is bad because it's...
In today's brief video, I'm going to bring up 5 reasons why I disagree with this video clip of Dr. Huberman discussing nicotine. Now, as a quick disclaimer, this is a small clip from a podcast he was on. You should go watch his full video review on nicotine on Dr. Huberman's YouTube channel to understand his full opinion on the topic. But as someone who struggled deeply with nicotine addiction for several years to vape products, cigarettes, and chewing tobacco products, I strongly disagree with his commentary in this podcast that nicotine is great for us. And that's for 5 primary reasons. Reason number 1, nicotine increases dopamine production, as Dr. Huberman has said. But something else that nicotine does is it releases an excess amount of dopamine. And I'd say about 99% of people who use nicotine, there's a chance that they are abusing the substance, right? So it's not just you're using a little bit, you're using nicotine all day long if you're anything like I was. And when you get this constant release of dopamine over and over again, it eventually leads to a dopamine deficit in the brain. And this is a really bad thing. When we enter a state of dopamine deficit, as is the case with substance use disorders or addictions, nicotine addiction being a substance use disorder, we eventually start to lose motivation and we enter into a state of anhedonia, or this kind of like depression state of mind. And this happens because of that dopamine deficit that's occurred in the brain. Repeat exposure to nicotine in excessive amounts will lead to this. So that's one reason I would say nicotine is actually bad for our brain versus good for our brain. Secondly, nicotine is a vasoconstrictor, so it limits blood flow. Not only does it reduce blood flow to our brain, which is a bad thing, but nicotine also reduces blood flow to the connective tissues and the joints within our body. This can lead to things like decreased bone density or osteoporosis, and it decreases, or rather increases, our healing time. So if you have back problems, disc herniations, degenerative disc disease disorders, nicotine is actually extremely bad for these things. This is why orthopedic surgeons don't want to do surgery until someone has abstained from nicotine for at least 6 weeks prior to the surgery, because of the higher incidence of failed surgical outcomes in people who use nicotine. And I'm not talking about cigarettes or vapes or chewing tobacco or all the other harmful ways people consume it. I'm strictly talking about nicotine. And again, it reduces blood flow to the brain, making it not great for the brain in the long term. And third point I'd like to make, as Dr. Huberman said, nicotine does release epinephrine, norepinephrine, essentially adrenaline. And this is what gives us that momentary increase in focus when it comes to consuming nicotine. Now, the problem that we run into is when we release those neurotransmitters in our body, adrenaline, we're constantly putting our body into a state of a fight or flight response all day long, every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, every time you hit your vape, you're creating a fight or flight response. This is physiologically taxing on the systems of our body. We are not meant to be in a state of fight or flight all day long. And Dr. Huberman has often discussed this on his very own channel. That is a major problem with nicotine, and that's a major reason why nicotine addiction is so exhausting. That brings me into my fourth point. Because nicotine does release adrenaline, and although there is that benefit of a temporarily increased focus, nicotine exits our body in about 30 to 60 minutes every time we use it. As the nicotine starts to detox our body in between uses, our body goes into a state of withdrawal. We go into active detox and withdrawal symptoms. And what does this do? This creates cravings, it creates headaches, it creates irritability, it creates fatigue, and it certainly increases brain fog. And then the user, which would have been myself, doesn't feel better, doesn't feel normal again until they consume more nicotine. Again, this is an extremely taxing process physiologically and psychologically on the human body. Nicotine, because it is a stimulant, because it puts us in and out of this constant state of withdrawal and detox, disrupts a healthy sleep cycle. And we know one of the most important things for brain health, for neuroprotection, things that protect our brain, is a well-regulated sleep cycle, as well as monitoring the amount of physical stress that our body's under throughout the day. So anything that disrupts sleep, whether it's alcohol, caffeine, or nicotine, long-term is probably going to turn out to be damaging for our brain. Now, what Dr. Huberman was talking about in this video was the positive effects of nicotine, perhaps from a medicinal standpoint, which is 100% factual and correct. Nicotine prevents the breakdown of acetylcholine, which is a really good thing when it comes to the prevention of dementia and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases. But if we stack up all those negative side effects that we often see with recreational nicotine use, which usually leads to a state of addiction, and that's not to mention if the person's addicted to cigarettes or vapes or chewing tobacco and all the other harmful consequences with that, we often see the person start to suffer from the side effects of addiction, spending money on a drug. Maybe there's guilt or shame involved with it. Maybe it's a financial loss. Maybe we're starting to lose our health because that addiction is taking our health from us. And that's creating psychological and physical stress on us. Nicotine addiction, in my opinion, is significantly outweighed by the negatives than it is any potential benefits. And for anyone who's saying, well, Dr. Frank, I'm worried about dementia or Alzheimer's, look into a supplement called Huberman A. This is a supplement that's also been shown to prevent the breakdown of acetylcholine in the brain and help improve focus and attention. That supplement is often combined with ginkgo biloba, which talk to your doctor, read about these supplements online, which has been shown to help increase blood flow to the brain, something that's very, very good for brain health in the long term. I made this video today not to disagree or make something controversial in regard to Dr. Huberman, because I love his work, and most of the things I said in today's video, I actually have learned from Dr. Huberman's YouTube channel, from Dr. Anna Lemke, a colleague of his who I interviewed on my YouTube channel. I'm just regurgitating back what I learned from the experts and putting it in perspective when it comes to nicotine addiction for you guys. This content or a clip like this, in my opinion, is extremely dangerous for someone who is addicted to nicotine, because all it takes is one clip, one piece of information to reinforce that nicotine addiction, and then we are right down that rabbit hole of use again. I remember one time watching an interview with Outlaw Dip and a Dr. Brad Rodu, R-O-D-U, who wrote an excellent book called For Smokers Only. And he was talking about some of the benefits of nicotine and some of the benefits of someone switching from smoking cigarettes to chewing tobacco. Now, at the time, I had quit nicotine products, but after watching that interview, I had an immediate relapse. And quickly, any benefits I received from nicotine were dramatically outweighed by all the negatives I was experiencing. Now, I know how dangerous this content can be. I also want to mention this. Let's take Nicorette, which most people aren't consuming it. And people who are consuming it, some people are chewing 20, 30 pieces a day. They call our offices to work with us. Look at the side effects of pharmaceutical grade nicotine. Increased blood pressure, increased heart rate, dizziness, insomnia, irritability, loss of appetite, indigestion, heartburn, hiccups, increased salivation, nausea, vomiting, cough, gas, diarrhea, oral irritation, dental pain, loosening of inlays, lack of stickability to your dentures, and TMJ joint pain, as well as nicotine withdrawal symptoms. Those are just some of the side effects of nicotine in the form of Nicorette, pharmaceutical grade nicotine. So to say nicotine is a health food or that nicotine is great for us, I assume he misspoke and that he was just, I don't think he actually meant that, to be honest, especially if you watch his full video on nicotine. But I think that's a stretch and an overreach. I understand that there's neuroprotective qualities to it, but exercise, getting a good night's sleep, maybe one of the most important things, cold showers, eating a healthy diet, and monitoring the stress in your life, I think is a much better way to achieve neuroprotection than consuming nicotine products. Maybe with the exception of people who have Alzheimer's, who have dementia, who are truly using nicotine from a medicinal standpoint and not from an abuse standpoint, which is typically used recreationally. I know the danger in videos like this. I know the danger in clips like this for a nicotine addict, which is what I once was. And I hate the term Nick addict, okay? I really do. But I know how this can be triggering. And hey, that's not Dr. Huberman's problem. That's a me problem. That's a you problem. All he was doing was stating some facts about nicotine. I'm simply including some of the facts that I think were left out of this 1-minute video clip that we watched. Facts that I learned from Dr. Huberman's and Dr. Anna Lemke's YouTube channels and discussions that I've had, with them. Check out the book Dopamine Nation. A lot of what I said about addiction to nicotine will make a lot more sense. I'll put a link for it in my video description. And if you check out the pinned comment, you can download the free 80-page guide on quitting smoking or quitting nicotine addiction. It's totally free. Check that out. And if you are quitting, follow me right into the next video where I talk about how to quit vaping, one of the fastest growing nicotine addictions out there, something I struggled with for years. I'll see you guys in the description, the pinned comment, or the next video.